Hi, everybody. I'm Jazz Tankay, Senior Artisans Editor at Variety, and so excited to be here today for this conversation hosted by BAFTA and the African American Film Critics Association. Today, I'm here with agents Humphrey Hendricks and Ryan Lucas, who are going to be joining us for a talk on the struggle to be seen, establishing agency conversation. Just a few housekeeping rules. We want this to be very interactive. So if you've got any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we will be answering them throughout the conversation. And I just want to dive right on in. So let's bring out Humphrey and Ryan. Thank you both so much for joining us. So I thought rather than me tell everybody what you both do, I thought let me hand the mic over to you. Humphrey, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
Great. My name's Humphrey. I am a talent agent. I work for Independent Talent Group, the best agency in the world, obviously. Ryan agrees. I've been in talent management since I left university, so 2012, and I was lucky enough to have a chance conversation with my friend's mum who works in the industry, and she's a very stern but lovely woman who effectively told me about myself and said, I know you love art and you love business, try agenting. And she set me up with an agent that's now retired, and I got my first internship and built up from there. And I started in my current job at Independent in 2015 as an assistant. Started signing clients in 2018. I've been an agent ever since, and I love it. I absolutely live for what I do. I've got amazing clients. I've met some incredible people along the way, including my esteemed panelist Ryan. And that brings us to where we are.
Love it. We're going to dive in more to your journey in a little bit. Ryan, tell us about your journey and who you are.
Much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Ryan Lucas. I'm a talent agent at United Talent Agency here in Los Angeles in our motion picture group. I had no interest in being an agent when I started in the mailroom 7 years ago. I took the job very reluctantly. I was a theater major. I'd done all these internships in theater. I was going to be a producer because producers connect dots. Those are the people that make things happen. Agents, and I will not curse. They're bad. And so I was very reluctant to take the job, but sort of people had described it as like a Devil Wears Prada gig where you work a year there and you can work anywhere. And I took it very reluctantly. And within the first 3 to 6 months, I was beginning to put the pieces together internally and recognizing what agents can do, how agents can find people who are just purely talented from all walks of life and actually connect the dots of their career and be an advocate. I was starting this in 2016. Everything was possible back then. Hillary was going to be president. There was a lot of idealism in my eyes, and that's still there in many ways, but I think coming into the fold at that time, not seeing many people who looked like me, but also seeing a future for people like me in this industry made me really want to stick around. So I worked in theater as an assistant for a minute, got promoted to do theater and be a representative for actors, writers, directors, the whole playbill, if you will. And was doing that for a second. And then this little thing called the pandemic hit. And all of my business completely fried up. And there was nothing to do, but at the same time, I think reflecting on my experience working in theater as a representative, there was more that I wanted beyond just theater. And I think in that process throughout the pandemic, I really began to transition further into motion pictures and represent actors really across all forms of content. And I was in New York for many years. I moved to Los Angeles a little under 2 years ago. And here we are having an amazing time. I think still having, I think all of the excitement that one has when they're in the mailroom and just really giddy. But you actually get to be an advocate. And I'm really excited for this conversation where we get to talk about the reality of that with such an amazing fellow panelist. So thank you.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I want to pick up something you said about, like, you know, those first 3 to 6 months where, you know, you come into this industry, you're learning so much about it, but also you look around and seeing people, or maybe not seeing people who look like you. Ryan, kick that off and talk about what that was like. And then Humphrey, you know, please tell, you know, talk about your experience too.
Sure. I have a great deal of privilege in this conversation. I'll say why. I grew up in an all-white community. I was part of the only Black family in my neighborhood. It was 96% white, I think like 3% Asian, like literally 0.2% Black. There were no Black people. And so the joke I make is my most important degree is I have a PhD in white people. And so I've spent a lot of my life like just around it for my own survival, for my own comfort, for all of these things. And so my ability to walk into spaces in which I am the only one in the room, I've been able to harness after many years of therapy as a superpower in walking into these spaces and being singular. But yeah, I think at its baseline, it's very lonely. I think all of the conversations that we have about mentorship, that we have about uh, sponsorship, it's so nice. I think a lot of people take it for granted where it's like, oh, you see someone who looks just like you, who has so much of your experience, a couple years ahead of you, 5 years ahead of you, 15, 20, 30. You can see everything lined out in front of you and you have somebody to follow. And yeah, I think being alone in many ways was challenging, but I think also that much more inspiring because you could see you are valued, you are necessary. There is reason for you to be here and to do what other people have not done before.
An incredible answer. I would say, as far as that particular point in the UK goes, yeah, tokenism is a thing. In my initial interning phase, I was often the only Black person there. And actually, when I got my first job at a company that no longer exists, I think I very flippantly said, this is the most diverse company I've worked for, because I was that. I will follow up and say one other thing, and it kind of backs onto what Ryan was saying about being a lone wolf. I think whenever you are in those situations, especially in what we do, like as an agent, you are a leader. You've kind of got to be aware of your surroundings and what the job at hand is, and not really let such isolation get in your way. Because inevitably, when you start signing people, my list is full. It's quite a diverse list. And even when I was assisting, I really enjoyed conversations with clients that had a similar background or upbringing that I did, because you can relate to that. A lot of our job is relating to people, and that is always going to be universal. Obviously, 2020 happened, and thank God that a lot of necessary conversations happened. I think Ryan and I have probably said this when we first had a drink, but George Floyd, honestly, that man helped all of us out. Like, that sparked a debate and it lit a fuse under so many people to really look around and see what they were doing, and things are going in the right direction, I feel. And I'm also quite happy to say that when I took my current job, I've got a colleague that works in another department that was there. And I was like, oh, this is great. I've got a brother in arms. And not that like race is so, I don't like to think about my life in such a way. Like, I know I'm Black. I'm so proud of that. It's my experience, and there's nothing that can really take away from it. But everything I do in my life is unapologetic about that. But you know, I've got to live, and I want to do this job, and I'm doing it at the best company that I could ever dream of. And if I'm the only one that looks like me now, which, you know, in my department for a little while, that's fine. I'm supported. It's also, you know, tokenism should be followed up with who are the people around you. I've been really fortunate to have a company structure that is incredibly supportive. I've never been made to feel isolated or other. I've always been encouraged, my ideas taken on board, and I've got some incredible advice from people that don't look like me, haven't had my particular upbringing. And I think that in itself is, yeah, it's really encouraging, and it's inspired me a lot, actually. I wouldn't really be here without it.
I not even to like ship our both of our companies, but like I also have to give a shout out to my employer in so many ways. I think with each passing year, there's been more, to the point that like I have a cohort. I have a cohort of Black talent agents alongside me, 8 other people, at 8 or 9, who are my peers. And I think that opportunity, it's something that even when I was starting in the mailroom was a bit of a dream, in that um, all of my work can be judged for my work. I can be judged for my taste and the things that are specific to my interests, as opposed to he's the Black agent. And there is a real level of specificity that often people of marginalized groups don't get, because they have to sort of compensate, cover, take under everybody. And to watch that progress, I think a lot of that was expedited or really triggered through the events of 2020. But in any event, actually watching that change and watching cohorts appear even within companies across the pond has been a really good sign of progress, especially in terms of combating that feeling of isolation, but also just like the low numbers.
Yeah. Humphrey, I want to pick up what you said, you know, about advice from people, like, you know, and also mentorship. Like, you know, what was the greatest piece of advice that you got along the way that, you know, helped you? Yeah, because sometimes you wake up and it's like, am I, you know, I love what I do, but is this what I want to do, kind of thing? And then you get this great advice. It's like, I'm on the right track. This is what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah, there are like different people along the journey that I've got like advice or like just really respected along the way. Am I allowed to name them? Give a little shout out to all these people.
Go for it. Let's do it.
So back in my ancient history, I interned at a company called Conway Van Gelder Grant. And Jeremy Conway still worked there. And I spent a couple of weeks, if not months, in his office. And this is a man that was older than I was. I mean, his name's on the freaking door. And yet it was so long ago that you had to go through magazines to find showcases and all that kind of stuff. And he really had a passion for finding talent. Like, the man never stopped. He didn't need to work, but had a work ethic that was infectious. He was great. John Grant as well told me, and I'll never forget it, that this job and what you do is all about taste. And I've always had that at the forefront of my mind. Nikki Van Gelder was just like great crack to be around. So shout out to Nikki. I think the co-chairman at ITG, Paul Imaris, once had a conversation with me and said, no one's going to tell you no apart from yourself, which I literally tell people all the time now. And it's almost like fuel in a way. It's like, why am I in my own way? Like, what's the obstacles? I mean, as agents, we kind of have to figure it out. Like, we're the ones that solve all the problems. And for just reasons, because all of our clients are amazing. That's why we work where we are, and we've got the jobs that we do. And yeah, I think, and also Oliver Slinger, who I've worked with for like him and Natalie Day for the last nearly 9 years. Like the people that I'm surrounded by are incredibly patient and understanding, and have also allowed me to go out and sign and not feel like there's a template of people that must be. Like I've got clients from literally all over the world because my taste is varied, but no one's going to sit down and tell me like, oh, you must go for that. And that's been important. I wouldn't be so comfortable in what I do, and I wouldn't feel a level of like fearlessness when it comes to this job had it not been for all those folks that, yeah, kind of spurred me on and kept me going. So shout out to all of them.
Love that. Ryan, what about for you?
I will just give one piece of advice that is always at the top of my mind, especially in this moment of being a representative myself. There is this amazing attorney, Andre Desrochers, represents many artists, and just like has the coolest office, I will say. If you ever get to see it, it's amazing, incredible art. But I remember right when I got promoted, he was like, you have to be sure to find your center of gravity. And I think especially as people of color, queer people, anybody marginalized, it's very easy to either lead with your identity, like have some sort of thing that people can just sort of ping onto you. And especially when you're a younger agent, you are being pulled in many different directions. You're served with many masters in that way. You got to serve the company and then serve your own clients. But the thing that he was trying to really get me to understand is the moment that you find your center of gravity, the thing that is your anchor, the thing that makes you very excited to do this job, you can actually move forward. You can lead. You can be quite ambitious, and have a real agenda. And I think especially for a lot of these bigger companies, it's very easy to sort of go through the system and find yourself lost, especially as people of color when there isn't really a blueprint. So I think finding your center of gravity has probably been the best advice that I've had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I love that. We actually have a question that I'd love to hear an answer to. Like, what are you looking for on a potential client's resume or social media before taking them on? Like, talk a little bit about that and how things have, how things have changed. Because obviously, social media, like, 5 years ago, TikTok wasn't as big as it was now. It's this huge thing, and Instagram, it's constantly changing. So, yeah, what do you look for?
Darling, do you want to go first?
Okay, darling. If I wish like I could give you like in the way that RuPaul's Drag Race has a very clear, rubric of what you need to get this done, I can't give you that. I think what I will say for me is people will say that this is all an objective thing and there are numbers that you have to live by and there are certain things. That's not true for me. I think at its core, anybody that I am interested in representing, I have to have the goosebump factor. And that's such a subjective thing. I get that you're like, how do you create that? You can't. And I hope that actually takes pressure off of people to just do what they do and the rest will follow. But I think for me, this job is so hard. My clients, like everyone is being told no the majority of the time. That if I'm going to do this again and again and wake up again and again and again and pitch and pitch and pitch, I have to be so excited about the art and the possibility of what this person does. No matter what the dollar sign is, because the dollar sign it all fluctuates. People get hot, people fade, and I think at its core, I as a representative, there has to be some level of inspiration that usually comes when like I get goosebumps when I watch a self tape. I get goosebumps when I watch a performance on stage and something very visceral happens to me. I think once that happens, I go, ooh, okay. Then you go, all right, what sort of jobs are out there? Can I actually deliver for this person in a meaningful way and move their career to a certain point? And, that's a little bit of recon and research of what jobs are out there, thinking about, have casting directors seen this person? Are they just out of school? Have they been working for years and years? What's the deal? I think there are a lot of places, and again, we're having a very real conversation. There are a lot of places, especially over the past decade, where there's been conversations about momentum and timing and level and esteem. And some of that I fully understand in terms of how do you maximize time, what resources can a certain company of this size, of that size, of that size really deliver for somebody. And that has to be so much about the match between the agent and the company and the client. Um, but I think there's also something when, like, if somebody is so undeniable and an agent is so excited, and I know this is true for me, I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. So I know that's not a very succinct and clear-cut answer, but this business is really subjective. It is, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a fool. Um, and so for me, it's really a visceral conversation with a little bit of math, but mainly visceral.
Yeah, exactly that. There's no formula. I would always tell people it's like 50% talent and 50% the person. I cannot represent people that I don't like. And to answer Sean Fuller's question more fully, half of the reason why I signed someone is this. It's having a conversation. I want to get them into a room and be like, who are you? Where are you from? What's your life story? Because that helps to get me excited. I took someone on earlier this year that's never acted, hasn't been to drama school, but this guy wrote me the loveliest email and had taken the time out to like put some scenes together. And I saw potential there. And he came in for a meeting and his life story moved me. And I haven't cried in over a decade. So like that says something. And it's actually been in this year when there's been plenty of strikes and plenty of things to get everyone worried or stressed. It's honestly been one of my highlights working with this unknown actor who has put the graft in and has been impressing so many people. So yeah, and that's a subjective thing. That's because I took the time to meet him. I look at everyone that writes to me, but there's no accounting for what that connection is when you see it. I mean, I want to be moved by material. I want to feel like I want to cry, which doesn't happen that often. Or like laugh out loud. I love comedians. But that just depends on the person and then what they're like in a room, because it's a tough business. And as Ryan said, a lot of the time you're literally telling someone that they haven't got that dream job that they want, which is difficult. And, I'm so happy being a cheerleader and a support system for the people I have. But adding to that is a decision that I don't take lightly, because, you've got to hold space for all of that. And it's not something I think anyone should ever rush into. So, yes, I think that's the end of my answer.
How do you turn that no, given that there are a lot of no's in the line of work that you do, into a positive? And you kind of touched on it, but yeah.
I think the business since I started working in it has changed so much. And I think in terms of that is when you kind of have to start getting mathematical. So like every new graduate that I take on, because we, have the drama school system over here. If I've got a young guy or girl or person that leaves drama school, does a load of self-tapes in the first 6 months, and the same people are coming back to them with tapes, even though they don't get those first four parts, like it's a really good sign when you're not having to pick up the phone or like email and constantly push and hound casting directors. In that regards, like, you know, it's almost what I said earlier, don't let anyone tell you no apart from yourself. You have to keep on going. This is the career, the vocation that these people have chosen. It's encouraging when all of the big casting directors are coming back because they really want to find a part for this person. Because you know, it's not it's true, it's a dogma. There's only ever one role. There's one person that's going to get it at the end of the day, of the hundreds, if not thousands, it takes for that one particular part. And those losses aren't insignificant because you're exposing yourself to more and more people in the industry. And yeah, that eventually does start bearing fruit. I've seen it happen time and time again.
Yeah.
I remember one of my first bosses gave a client this great advice or just the truth, that if you look at the final callback lists of some of the most famous movies and roles you've ever seen, if you look at number 2 and number 3, the next year, number 2 got something. The next year, number 3 got something. And as those lists continue to go on and on and on, often the same people are appearing. And as long as you are sort of in that fold, you're doing great work, it's going to happen. There's a lot of patience, there's a lot of work that goes into that. But I think the biggest thing when we hear the no is why? Why is the no happening because they are simply not right? And that often is like, and if that's actually true, that's like you can't do anything else. You've done a great job. It is just simply not what the director is envisioning. There's a different conversation where it's like, no, the work wasn't great, or they were not prepared, or there is something where the actual actor is fumbling in a way. And then that's a conversation of, okay, well, what can you do as an actor to salvage that? So I think when you hear the no and trying to turn it into a yes, maybe next time, it's a lot of, well, why, how, what was going on? And I often think the no is the greatest opportunity, especially for younger actors, for learning and for building themselves to be even better.
Yeah. What about relationship building? Like, what is the best way to develop those relationships with industry professionals and networking and, you know, just getting out there, both as agents and for like, you know, on the talent side? Like, what have you learned? I mean, given that we're in this constantly changing landscape, but we had the pandemic, we were all like in lockdown for forever, and then yeah.
As an agent, I mean, it kind of comes with the job. I think it's kind of like you can't avoid, if you were an agent and didn't like know people outside of your own office, I'd be incredibly impressed. Like what we do and our commodity in a way is people. So it's important that we know who the casting directors are. You get to understand who the production companies are after a certain point. Because, you know, we've got to be creative. We've got the talent that might be the missing piece of a script that, you know, you won't know about if it's not up and running and greenlit with casting. But if you know that Blueprint have something that they're developing that one of your top tier clients might be right for, then that's going to bear fruit. And that really comes from the fact that, you know, we have to do that as a consequence of representing our clients. I can definitely speak to this in the UK. Whenever there's a press night or a theatre show, we take a guest, we take casting directors, we take producers, we make those introductions, and you're kind of doing that. And also, you know, people have the impetus to try and get together and do things as a collective. You find like-minded people. Like Ryan and I did a couple of years ago, which is great. I think it's inevitable for people to like lean on each other because you see each other out. There'll be clients that people want to collaborate on at any time in your life. I think the most important thing in those circumstances is always to, and I like to keep a good sense of humor about it all because it can be stressful, and at the very least we can try and have some fun with it.
I'm gonna misquote Issa Rae, but her thesis is that I feel like there's some viral TikTok video where she talks about this is like everyone's talking about building up, really going up, go to the side, meet your peers. Whether you're an assistant, whether you're a young actor, you're a PA, you're somebody on a set, who is next to you? Often these people over the next 10, 15, 20 years are running the studio, running the show, running the agency, maybe representing you. And some of my closest peers within this industry were like, lowly assistants such as myself, who, we met running to get coffee for our bosses. We met at a ticket pickup. And in those opportunities where you find people that are peers, I think those are the most important relationships in the long run, in terms of being able to sort of reach across, whether that's as an actor, at an audition. Like there are so many people around you that can't necessarily get you something right now, or there's some great value add, but these people can be friends, can be great confidants, and can really be great allies throughout your career. I think when it comes to reaching out to people who maybe are further along in their career than you, maybe a representative, the worst that somebody can do is delete the email. Because I think there are certain people where you do email them, you cold call them, they respond, it actually works out. That does happen. And then there are people who don't do that. And I think that just depends. But no one is, unless you say something absolutely insane, rude, inappropriate, just like the typical things that you would never send an email to someone to say. The worst that could happen is that the email is deleted, and that's okay. And so, but I think the biggest thing is in terms of networking, especially as people of color, see who's around you. See who's around you and make sure you're connected to them first and foremost.
Yeah, I love that. Talk about some of your goal, your leaders in the field, what you do, like what are some of your goals, like, looking ahead or, even for the short term, like what have you, what's your vision out there for the next 6 months or so?
Well, the next 6 months, I don't know. I mean, this is no, it's we're in a wild time. I
Yeah.
think anybody that can predict what is about to happen. I mean, the strike is going to end. It will at some point, strikes plural. But in terms of what the timeline is, how this all works, how it affects the industry down to assistant level is still unclear. And so I'll say for me, I think the goal of mine is to get into even further alignment on the people that I want to represent, the sorts of stories that I want those clients to be able to tell. I think right now I'm doing my best to just stockpile as much material as possible to know what is out there for the people that I represent, the people that I want to represent. I am trying to connect with as many people as possible to just know them. And sort of, I mean, I really don't like sports, but someone just really referenced this as like we're in spring training. And that this is an opportunity to just kind of exercise all of the muscles. And so I wish I could give you some big, lofty, ambitious goal. But I think if anything, this is a great opportunity to sharpen skills. And for me, that is just as an agent and figuring out, even further what the agenda is going to be the moment that the strike is up. I think for many actors, And obviously, when you're not working, that can take a great toll. So I'm not here to say everyone has to be doing this or that, but I think in this downtime, what is the thing that you can do that further reignites your creative engine? What is the skill set that you can, further hone in on, that, when you are able to audition, when you are able to work, that makes that work that much more successful, effortless, and good. So yeah, the next 6 months, it's a big question mark. But I think in terms of what I can control, it is just trying to, yeah, further hone in on my craft where I can.
Yeah. Humphrey?
I would say yes to all of that. Perfect. Double down, but also to stay inspired. I think it's really easy in times like this to be like, oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow? But I like to think that I've read enough recently of the Stoics to be forcing myself to be more present. And we're in a lucky position. Like the people we meet, the stories that they tell, the stories that they themselves have like been through and experienced can spark something within you. I mean, I felt that this January. And I like that to continue. I think it's thrilling, if anything. Can't really do my job without it. And I'm really fortunate enough to have some clients doing some great things, and I want to find some greater things for them to do in the coming 6 months whilst inspired.
Yeah. I want to talk about something you said, Ryan, about like, the stories that, you want to see being told, like to that, like, over the last, let's just say 3 to 5 years, like what changes have you seen as far as the stories that, the industry is telling, whether, it's diverse storytelling, representation, whether it's the LGBTQs or like, basically our stories, like how has that changed? What change have you seen? Do you think we are changing? Like, are we really doing better or?
Oh, I'm mute. Okay. Yes, I think we are doing better. I think we're making progress. It's never fast enough. I think everybody agrees. Get it going. What's going on? But I think the most exciting observation I have made, and I think and others have obviously made, is that we are seeing more and more stories where characters who are three-dimensional have a journey that is informed by their identity, but the identity does not predicate the story. And it's not, the gag is they're Black. The gag is they're gay. The gag is they're disabled. That's the story. And I think for many, many years, and out of necessity, I want to be really clear, out of necessity, many of the stories that specifically the Black community has been able to tell and has been greenlit to tell have been such a moment of history. It happened. We need to tell the story, and it needs to be out there, and we're going to use cinema to just tell history. And that is so important. Um, and that is awesome. I think the way that things are bending is, sure, there are moments of history, but like what we want to see is what the white people have been able to do for centuries at this point, which is talk about the human condition and actually play characters with real dimensionality rather than just righteousness, respectability, and all of the things that make people accept us. And watching that happen, for Black folks, for Asian folks, for queer folks, for many, many people, throughout the world and a global majority, that has been the most heartening sign. But I think, I represent a young lady. She's a Black woman, Juilliard trained, killer actress, and she was going off to shoot something, and she was going to play the wife of a civil rights icon. And she'd done that before in this thing, wife to this person in this thing. And she said to me, And I'll never forget it. She was like, I'm so excited to do this job. It's gonna be so fun. But I want to make sure that I'm 25 right now. I don't want to wake up when I'm 40 and my entire resume is the wife to this civil rights hero. And the number of times, especially for Black women, where like the crumbs of like they get a nice scene where you get to learn that they did something too, and all of these stories which are important, but yeah, I think when you compare that to our white counterparts and the white actresses, the white actors who get to just play as actors so much more. I think that is the sort of work that's happening. But we need to see more of that, I think, especially for our younger people.
Humphrey, what about your experience?
Definitely much the same, although I would say that there I can only really talk from my own experiences. I represent a couple of young Black female artists that have led films and TV shows that have allowed them to play. Obviously, you know, they're Black, it's their experience, but it's not all about like destitution, drugs, X, Y, and Z. And that's been really comforting. I think that in amongst this conversation, obviously like us on this call are like Black folks, but like diversity is like it's a spectrum, and there's so many other people out there that are currently underserved. I have a client that's like East Asian, he's mixed East Asian and British, and it's astonishing to me that this actor who's brilliant has had two leading roles from America in the last 2 years, and yet in the UK, I once had an offer for him to do a one-day part in a well-known TV show, and I was like, unless you're going to match the quotes, this isn't going to happen. But it's just not there. It almost feels sometimes as if you have to be part of the zeitgeist before that happens, which is a really sad and quite pessimistic way of looking at things. But you know, doing what we do, knowing who we know, and being able to have the little influence we do have to put people in front of the right person at the right time, I'm hopeful that maybe one day soon we'll see a bit more. We'll see diversity on screen, and not for like shock factor or like by checking a box, but these are rich stories. Like everyone's experiences are different. That makes for a richer life. Like I've got clients from Europe that attack self-tapes in a much different way to actors from England that have been trained. And it's a joy to see. And I want to see that in a TV show or a movie. You know, that also goes towards people's nationalities, where they're from. Like we effectively are looking for those performers, their essences and what they bring to the stage or a screen somewhere. And I think there just probably needs to be a bit more opportunity for everyone to be able to tell stories, and not just the traditional actors of yesteryear who, yeah, the gold stars of like the golden age. We all know the prototype that get to flex that muscle. But I'm hopeful. Things are all kind of heading in the right direction. I know, you know, I'm lucky enough to have colleagues that work in literary, and knowing what's being commissioned and like what production companies are kind of like taking chances on these days. I know that there's a hunger for those stories to be told. Whether they get greenlit by a broadcaster, another story. But that's a step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the challenges that you face as agents. Like, what are the challenges of representing Black clients within the industry? Does it become performative? And like, how do you ground yourself as well as your clients, you know, in an industry that doesn't, you know, necessarily value or see talent through this and it's to your point, Ryan, through this non-racial lens?
I think for me, anyway, and yeah, there have been some instances recently. It's really important, and across the board, that every single client that we have has to feel held, and we have to understand their needs and what happens, and bridging the gap between production and a person who has afro textured hair and an HOD that thinks that they know better and their team is going to handle it. It's insane to me that we can even have this conversation in the year 2023, but we're here. And we have to be dogged about these things. It's insane to me that anyone should, ever go to work and feel uncomfortable or feel different just for the pure fact that they're more melanated than someone else. That is a reality of our industry. Unfortunately, sometimes those stories are there. So yeah, as an agent, I'm an advocate in those moments. I'm not against having conversations that are uncomfortable, especially as a Black man, having to pick up a phone and be like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, how, sorry, pardon me, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear. But how can you let someone be in a situation like that? It's against the law, but there's always this idea that no matter what the scenario is, the show must go on, the project's got to get made, it's got to be birthed. And it's just really sad that anyone should ever feel that in those circumstances, their representatives don't get them, because we have to be there to also tell that person that's insane, we're going to do something about it. And you do, and you kind of have to like encourage as well. And I find a lot of the time one of the clients I work with flitters between saying that she gets like TED Talks and Oprah chats from me, because it can be maddening getting those or having horrible experiences on productions. But I think it's also kind of like our jobs to remind people to play and be creative. Don't feel as if this should be a reason for you not to follow that passion of yours. If that's acting, writing, casting, whatever it is. There's so much adversity out in the world. I'm sure that all of us on this call have faced at any one point, but the tenacity to keep on going has like produced this. I never thought I'd be on a panel at this point in my life, but here we are. And actors should be afforded the same luxury. I think it costs nothing to remind someone that, not to get all Kris Jenner about it, but they're doing amazing, sweetie. Because, they go on to do incredible work that touches someone. These are things, these shows, they're films, they're plays that reach out to people that need to see them, whether they're from the same background or other backgrounds. And that's kind of like the magic of, what they do and what we do as a team. It would be insane to me for Black talent to, not be, not have access to that. So I'm just keep them going. And look, you also have to be joyful. I like to think that, when I'm not having very serious conversations at 6 o'clock in the evening, I like to have fun with everyone I work with. Like, of course, there's a job to do, but we're also human beings. It can be really like somber at times, but we need to be able to laugh and to talk about how problematic some Tyler Perry films are. But we live in the UK, so we haven't got to deal with that. And just keep it going. That will mean something. And anyway, so far so good. I'd be mortified if any of my clients in a situation like that didn't feel like A, that I was present, or B, that they were held. Especially being a man of color myself. I take that. I mean, everyone takes it seriously. There are, my colleagues at work obviously are all over it, but I think it's felt a bit more when you understand exactly what that feels like. And you just dig deep, and you're that support system. And, you know, Miss Trunchbull going in and putting people in the chokey for not having the right hairstylist.
To that, before you answer, Ryan, who, like, I've heard that so many times, department heads not knowing how to deal with Asian hair, black hair, skin.
Hmm.
How can we or they do better? Like, where does that
It's
come
so
from?
simple. It's so simple.
Answer it. Answer
You
it.
you have a cast list when you cast a show. You literally have all of their faces. If you see a black person, get a black hairstylist. If you see someone that's of Asian descent, East Asian, Southeast Asian, get them someone that has the experience, that has lived with that hair, has managed that hair. It's insane to me that, like, obviously, you know, hairstylists or like makeup artists, whoever it is, have a team of people that they work with. But I think people need to understand sometimes that they're not going to be the best person for the job if the person in that chair does not feel comfortable with them doing their hair. You've effectively lost, you fucked it all up. And it's maddening that, you know, the idea that you can't talk about like the cost of it all. Wigging might be too expensive. It's insane. Like, the shows cost millions of dollars or millions of pounds to make one episode. Paying a like 0.02% of that to get someone a wig fitted, let alone their own hairstylist, is asking nothing. I think I also feel so frustrated whenever I have to do a contract and ask for this, because for all of my like clients that aren't black, guess what? You know, you don't have that conversation. There's no wording anywhere on any client I have that it's like, that's British, like white British, that I'm saying they must have a hairstylist that manages Caucasian hair, because it's ridiculous. So it should just be understood. People of color need to have someone there that is going to be able to do, yeah, their hair, their makeup, and will just be understood.
Humphrey's answer is the most immediate thing, and I think it's really obvious. I would say the longer term answer is we need to be teaching everyone how to do black hair. If you can do black hair, you can do anybody's hair. And the idea that, like, there are people who are supposed to be the top of their field, who are the most esteemed hairstylists, the moment someone says hot comb, anything, they go, oh, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And there are people on studio movies, people who are like high up on call sheets on studio movies, who've had to get up several hours earlier to do their own hair. It's insane. And I think, just to piggyback into the answer to part of the challenge, is I think the hair thing over anything is indicative of, I think the biggest challenge is, because racism exists, Black people, it takes so much more work, really any marginalized person, but in this conversation, let's talk about Black people, being understood. Being understood is really hard. And so much of our job, whether that's with putting someone into an audition room, putting someone up for a role, negotiating, talking about press, talking about hair, talking about all these things, are all of these projections that so much of this industry, down to people on set, have. Either they deify you, queen, goddess, all of these things. They think you're from the hood. They think all of these things they just project on you. That could be true, not true, often aren't true, because you just made some silly little projection because you saw the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air 20 some years ago. And in this context, so much of what our job to do, and I guess the obligation, the privilege, whatever you call it, for us, especially as Black representatives, is like, let me be that person that can break this down for the other, so that you, an actor, do not have to do all of this extra work beyond the work of your craft. I think especially in these conversations where we have to sort of put a foot down and really advocate for our clients, there is this deep fear that many actors, especially actresses of color, have, being too difficult, being a diva, being so demanding, when they are simply holding you accountable for the very thing that you promised they were going to get. And when they don't get it, she's difficult. You can tell I'm very animated about this. I feel very strongly that so much of our job and the thing that we are one of our most important moments is like really being able to fight and be an advocate so that these artists who really should be focused on nothing but their craft, their performance, which is so hard to do. It's like being an astronaut. It is so hard. But especially when you're a person of color, being understood so that you can get all of the resources, all the protections to be even anywhere near your white counterparts in terms of preparation, care, that's where all the work. And that's the most challenging part. It's gotten better. It is, we are so, I think both of us, so grateful to the people that have come before us who've been able to sort of carve that out. But yeah, that's the big challenge of just trying to identify and then push aside the ways that Blackness, there's a projection of it, and that projection is actually harming someone's opportunity and work.
Yeah. Well, to
Also, there's
that,
not enough Black
go ahead.
creators in production. Like, there's not, I'm sure opportunities are being presented, but the word's not getting out there. Like, I've never in my life, I'm sure there have been like certain shows, but seeing Black people in those positions in hair and makeup does not happen as much as it probably should do. And I wonder why, and that should change for one. I've just had to come back to your point about teaching people Black hair. I had that quite recently, and I can speak from this experience that it did not work out so well. Because who defines the quality of what that is? Someone saying that I've taken a 24-hour intensive course in Afro-Caribbean hair will never work for me or my clients. And that is, I know, it's wild. But that's the kind of stuff that people come out with. Like, and I literally had to tell someone why that is just not going to work. Being a Black hairstylist, you've obviously got the lived-in experience. Those people need to be given those opportunities to work on sets, not opposed to salons and whatever. And I think for us anyway, right now, I'm just like, arguing with people to get the money to pay their usual person. They just come onto set, they're given the assignment and they do it. It's insane that we're having this conversation, but also, whilst talking on it, it's quite clear the amount of opportunity that is being given to a lot of people to, enter the industry via that department. So, end on a positive, as it were.
Love it. Well, to that, this is a question, do you think we need to rebrand the words diversity and inclusion? And how do we move forward? Like this conversation about hair and makeup in 2023 is exhausting, yet we're having it. How do we move forward using less energy about being diverse and being ourselves? Like,
just be specific. Be specific. I hate diversity, inclusion. What's it? MENA, the global. What the fuck is the global majority? Who are they? Who are these people? Like rats, mice? I have no idea what you're talking about. I think that it's insane to me that some people feel so uncomfortable just typing the word like African, like African American. Black does not make you racist. I think like the people grouping you together, we are not a homogenous like thing. Like we are individual people. And I don't think that being specific should be shied away from when we're having conversations, because 9 times out of 10 when those words are used, they are directed at a person, a type, a race, whatever. But how are we meant to know that because you're writing diversity or inclusion just being other? It's almost like writing the words. It's like Said Orientalism. Like it's just that. It's just like otherness from what the status quo is. I hate it. It really grinds my axles. Yeah, that's me done.
You know, I think, I'll be put on my PhD in whiteness hat. I think there is a very noble intention with a lot of terminology because people are trying to understand. People are simply trying to like figure out the math for a human issue, which is the problem. And people are trying to go, okay, well, what is the right word to plug in here, 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 here? And to Humphrey's point, specificity. What exactly are you looking for? Don't call somebody diverse. Don't call somebody inclusive. Don't be vague. And I think what